Alright, we have another problem in fluid mechanics about buoyancy. So let's read the problem. Let's go. A rigid circular cone is 50 millimeters in radius and 170 millimeters high, and we are given the weight in air, which is 1.5 newtons, yung weight niya kapag sa air lang. How much force is required to push this cone vertex, this is the vertex, downward into ethanol? The specific gravity of ethanol is 0.79, so that its base is exactly at the surface. How much additional force will push the base 6.5 millimeters below the surface? So, ano yung hinahanap natin? We are required to find the force para maging ganito yung scenario. Yung base niya ay exactly at the surface. That's scenario number 1. At yung pangalawa naman is how much additional force. Diba may makukuha tayong force para magstay yung cone natin dito sa exactly at the surface. Tapos hahanapin din natin yung additional force required para ma-push natin yung cone na to so that its base is 6.5 millimeters below the surface. Dito, magkakaroon ng 6.5 millimeters doon sa bago mag-surface. Ayan. So, let's first find the force para mangyari tong scenario to. Yung na exactly at the surface, yung base ng cone natin. So, let's start. What are we given? We are given the radius of our cone, which is 50 millimeters daw yung radius. Convert na natin sa meters. That is 0.05 meters yung radius. And then we are also given the height. The height of our cone is 170 mm, or simply 0.17 meters. Given din tayo ng weight sa air. The weight niya, ang weight daw ng cone natin kapag sa air lang is equal to this one, 1.5 newtons. 1.5 newtons daw yung weight niya kapag nasa air, magaan lang siya. Tapos, yung fluid natin, we're given the specific gravity of ethanol. The Sg of ethanol is equal to 0.79. Then, we are asked to find the force. Dalawa yung force na hinahanap. So, let's just say the force we need is F. Sige, F. Ayan, we are asked to find the force. Now that we've written down everything we need, we can now finally start solving our problem. From here, what will be our first approach? Again, the formula for the buoyant force is equal to density times gravitational acceleration times the volume displaced times gamma, or it is also equal to the gamma of the fluid, again, times the volume displaced. And this is our diagram. So, since nakalutang siya sa tubig at ang base na is exactly at the surface, meron siyang weight. Its weight is directed downwards. Tapos hinahanap nating force P para yung base niya ay exactly at the surface. And then, since it's submerged in a fluid, the fluid will exert an opposite force, which is the buoyant force. Okay? From that illustration, we could first take the summation. Summation tayo ng vertical forces or the forces in the y direction, assuming na pababa is positive. We have here the weight of the cone plus the force P. Sige, lagay natin dito. Force P. Force P minus the buoyant force is equal to 0. Rearranging this, we will have the buoyant force is equal to the weight plus the force P. This is P. Mukha siyang D. That's P. Okay. From here, what could we do? We know that buoyant force is equal to the gamma of our fluid times the volume displaced. At since nakalubog siya entirely at ang base niya ay nasa surface, so basically, ang volume displaced natin is yung volume ng cone. So we have here the specific weight of ethanol times the volume displaced, and then the weight of our cone, which is given 1.5 newtons. Yan yung weight niya sa air. So we have weight niya plus the force P na hinahanap natin. And rearranging the equation, force P is simply transpose lang natin yung weight sa kabilang side. We will have the specific weight of ethanol, yung fluid natin for this problem, times the volume displaced. The volume displaced minus the weight. Minus the weight. Okay. Ayan. I hope you guys could follow. So basically, sasalpak na lang natin yung mga values natin. We have this. We have the gamma of ethanol. Madali lang yan since we are given the specific gravity of ethanol. So, the problem is this one. What is the volume displaced? Sabi ko nga kanina, since our cone is completely submerged, our volume displaced is simply the volume of the cone. At ano ba ang volume ng cone? Ito yung magiging challenge sa buoyancy. The geometry. Yeah. The volume of a cone is simply 1/3. Remember that, okay? 1/3 area of the base, which times height. And we know, ang base ng cone ay ano? It is a circle. So 1/3 the volume of the area of a circle, the area of the base is pi r squared times the height. So this is our formula for the volume of the cone. So salpak lang natin lahat. We will get the value for P. So lagay natin dito. The value of P is equal to what? The specific weight of ethanol, we could get this by the Sg of ethanol times the gamma of H2O, diba? Okay. So, the Sg of ethanol, sige, lagay natin. Sg of ethanol times the gamma of H2O times the volume displaced minus the weight. Substituting every value into their corresponding variables, the missing force P is equal to Sg ng ethanol, 0.79 times gamma ng water. What is the gamma of water? 9810 Newton per cubic meters. And again, the volume displaced, ito yung magiging challenge. Dapat alam mo yung mga volume ng mga objects, particularly yung mga common or regular shaped objects, tulad ng cone. So, the formula for the volume of a cone, again, is 1/3 area of the base, which is pi r squared. So, we have here pi. Our radius na 50 millimeters or 0.05 meters. 0.05 meters. That is squared since it's an area. And then we have height. Our height is this one, 0.17 meters. Oops, that is our volume. Okay. Now we have the volume. Lalabas yan ay cubic meters. And then finally we have the weight in air, which is this one, 1.5 newtons. Ayan. From here, cancel out lang yung cubic meters from the volume tsaka dito sa specific weight. And pressing that into your calculator, you will end up with the value of, what is the value? Let's just use 3 decimal places. 1.949. 1.949. That is in newtons. Alright, this is our answer for the first scenario. Ito daw yung kailangan nating force to push the cone para yung base niya is exactly at the surface of the water. Pero may hinahanap pa tayo. How much additional force will push the base 6.5 millimeters below the surface? Kailangan pa natin siyang ibaba ng 6.5 millimeters. So, at 6.5 mm below the surface. Ayan. Hinahanap din natin yung force. Additional force. So, okay na tayo dito sa 1.949. Ang hahanapin na lang natin ay yung additional force. Ibig sabihin, since completely submerged na yung ating cone sa tubig, siguro konting-konting force na lang yung kailangan nating i-apply para bumaba yung cone pa natin so that it is 6.5 millimeters lower than the water surface. So we are expecting a smaller value of force. So let's start. How will we solve this? We know that since ibababa pa natin siya, ibababa pa natin siya dito sa fluid natin, it will experience a pressure difference. Magkakaroon siya ng mas mataas na pressure, makaka-experience ng higher pressure since we lower this to we are lowering this to a higher depth in the fluid. Pero it's mababa naman, 6.5 millimeters. Pero regardless, since bumaba yung weight, tumaas yung height or yung depth, it will experience a change in pressure. So, we know the formula exerted by the fluid is equal to rho GH. And substituting, we know that what is the specific gravity of our fluid? 0.79. Just substitute 0.79 times the density of water para makuha natin yung density ng fluid. Alright, that is our rho. And G is 9.81. The gravitational acceleration, meter per second squared, times the height, which is 6.5 millimeters, or in meters, convert that to meters, this will be 0.0065 meters. Cancel yung isang meters dyan. We will end up with Newton per square meter, or simply Pascal, value of pressure. So, inputting that into our calculator, 0.79 times 1,000 times 9.81 times 0.065 will end up with 50. 50.37435. 37435. That is in Pascal. So now we have the pressure na na-experience niya 6.5 millimeters below the surface. So what additional force para maibaba natin siya sa 6.5 millimeters below the surface? We know that the formula for force for pressure is simply force over area. But we need is the force. From here, just cross multiply this there. The force we need is simply area times P. Balik na rin natin para masagwa. FAP. So this will be force is equal to pressure times the area. We will end up with the force needed para bumaba pa siya 6.5 millimeters below the surface. So, we will simply substitute. So, yung pressure na nakuha natin kanina is 50.37435. Pascal is Newton per square meter. And then the area of our base. What is the area again? Since we have here a cone, the area is a circle. So that is simply pi r squared. And our radius is 0.05 meters. So pi r squared. Pi times 0.05. That is squared. The squares will cancel. The meter squared square will cancel. We will be left with our final unit for force. That is in newtons. So just multiply 50.37435 times pi 0.05 squared. We'll end up with, let's use 4 decimal places this time. Sige, 3 na lang din para pareho. You'll end up with the value of 0.396. 0.396 newtons. Tulad ng nabanggit natin kanina, since our object is completely submerged, hindi na masyado magbabago. Konting force na lang ang kailangan para mas lumubog siya. So the additional force is 0.396 newton. So this is the answer for this problem. Para pumunta yung base ng cone natin at exactly at the water surface, we need to exert an additional 1.949 newtons of force. At para naman bumaba pa siya, 6.5 millimeters below the surface, the additional force we need is almost negligible, pero it's necessary. Since 6.5 millimeters, we need an additional of 0.396 newtons. That is all for this problem. Alright.